All right, welcome to Servant Leadership Library, where we uncover the wisdom of leading with compassion, humility, and purpose. I'm your host, Nicholas Paulukow, and today we're diving deep in with a special guest who embodies the essence of service leadership. Join us in none other than Steve Schedler, the beacon of light at Samaritan Center, where compassion meets action. Together, we'll explore the power of service, the art of leading by example, and the transformative impact it has on individuals and communities alike. So grab your favorite beverage, settle in, and let's embark on this enlightening journey together. So Steve has served as a nonprofit and human service setting for over 20 years and has worked in nonprofit leadership for over 15 years. Steve combines personal and professional passion to help teams and organizations achieve their missional and their sustainable goals in effective and creative ways. He also helps train the next generation of counselors and helps as an instructor at Messiah University. Steve finds peace in the world with his family and, when possible, a remote northern woodland. I love that. The Samaritan Center fosters hope and healing through professional counseling services, business consulting, clergy and congregation care, and education, while respecting and integrating personal and spiritual values. The center strives to ensure that quality professional services are acceptable to all people. Currently, Samaritan serves as a client population from Lancaster, Lebanon, Berks, and York, and other counties, with clinical administrative programs of staff about 40 plus employees, as well as 15 partnering consultants for our other consulting branches. Welcome, Steve. We're really excited to have you join us today. What a great story of kind of your mission and what you've kind of been driving with your career today. We really appreciate you being with us.
Well, Nick, thanks for having me. Thanks for that intro. Yeah, appreciate being here.
Yeah, what a wonderful intro. Tell us a little bit about your story, Steve. A little bit about yourself, if you don't mind sharing, kind of what got you into this career. A lot of nonprofit work, really about serving others. Can you kind of tell us kind of what spurred that journey for you?
Yeah, I think if you go back far enough, it really you get into personal influences, definitely, growing up and just trying to figure out life and why do we make the decisions that we make? Why
Mm,
do we interact with people the way that we do?
mm,
So I think a lot of people that end up in this genre of mental health work, we have some of those big questions about,
yeah.
how and why do things work the way they work amongst us human beings here on this.
Yeah.
I have this saying I say a lot of times, we're on a giant rock flying through outer space. It gets a little
Valid point.
complicated. It gets a little
Yeah, it gets a
complicated.
little heated
It
sometimes
gets a
too, I
little
guess,
heated. It
right?
could get a little heated.
Yeah.
Could get a little heated. So for whatever reason, I had this natural inclination to wonder about life and
Wow.
some of these things, and so ended up in this genre of mental health and human services and
Okay.
such. And you know, uh, coming out of college, I got my first job was at a large provider of behavioral health care
Really?
services,
Okay.
and they're about, even at that point, this is over 20 years ago now, probably, they were over 1,000 employees.
Oh, wow.
And, a lot of formative experiences happened there for me, definitely.
Oh, that's amazing. And so, from the perspective of those that are in school today, like did you always know that you wanted to get into kind of counseling, or like what spurred you kind of through your college career, or to get into kind of this field? I mean, it probably has a vast amount of areas that you can serve in, but kind of what drew you to, getting out of school and getting right into a provider? Like how did that happen?
Yeah, my journey has really been step by step. I didn't always
Okay.
have a master plan on some of this. I
Okay.
shared a little bit of that personal journey, how I had that kind of some of those natural inclinations, and then I ended up studying psychology as a bachelor's student, and
Okay.
that's a degree that a lot of people would try to talk you out of, really.
Yeah.
So I don't know that everybody was excited about that in my life, but
Ooh.
I felt that that was the right place for me at that point, and I just dove in and had a lot of great experiences, a lot of amazing people, and had some really memorable professors. as well in that. And so you get out what you get out, and then you work on the front lines. At least that's how it was when I was coming out.
Right.
So I
Okay.
worked on the front lines of behavioral health, um, evening shift, weekends, the whole bit,
Mm.
and worked with high acuity populations. Worked with
Okay.
residential treatment, which is
Oh, wow.
with adolescents and children that are struggling in pretty
Wow.
significant ways. A lot of trauma, a lot of folks, a lot of
Okay.
kids coming out of trauma backgrounds and this and that. So that was there was sometimes when I talk about my leadership journey, might end up focusing on when I had the titles,
Yeah.
right? But the journey, looking back, the journey really started with some of those initial roles.
Mm.
Really, starting out on ground one, floor one, yeah, right, on the kind of the front lines, I say,
Oh,
of behavioral health care and all
it
the
kind of
things
just sparked
you learn.
your interest when you kind of got into it, I guess, right? Like anything else. Like everybody's like, well, how am I going to know? Like talking to college students, like, well, what if I make a mistake? And there is no mistake, right? This life's a journey. So like you got to go experience it. And that's kind of what you're saying or what I'm hearing, right? A secret, don't laugh at me now. I wanted to get into counseling and I went to my professor and said like, this is what I want to do. And he laughed at me and he said, do you know what they make? You won't even be able to feed your family on 20 grand a year. You are not doing that, son. And I'm like, but this is a real passion. I really want to help people. And, so that was not such a positive experience. But what really led me to believe is hopefully the work that I do now might not have the same impact, but really kind of drew that same passion of helping others and kind of impacting others. But that was my first experience trying to understand the world that you live in every day. So I know you're probably like, oh man, Nick, thank God you didn't. You're a little nuts there for this, Not a good listener, Nick.
Yeah, yeah. No, thanks for sharing that story. And I think that's a common narrative that a lot of people hear. But part of my story would be that, there's a lot of pathways in the field, and there's a lot of opportunity in the field to really have a lot of impact and find creative ways to build a career over time.
Mm,
And some of those early positions where you're kind of starting out, they can be pretty intense, but you learn a
yeah.
lot. And from a leadership perspective, I was thinking back to when was the first time that, I really carried any type of a leadership flag,
Right.
I think that it goes all the way back to even that initial position.
Really.
And there were times when, someone had to be kind of the shift lead. So we would have a
Mm,
small core team that was responsible for running the unit,
right.
those shifts. And there was times where we would take turns being shift lead
Mm,
and pretty intense moments in all of that.
yeah.
Formative, very formative. And out of some of those experiences, through a series of promotions in that setting, then I ended up getting my first director role. Then over
Okay.
in the course of about 5 years, I had a couple different positions, and then I was tapped on the shoulder. I didn't apply. I was tapped on the shoulder, and it was,
Wow.
you think about being a program director.
Mm,
And at the time that I was one of the youngest program directors in that whole system, definitely,
okay.
at
Okay.
that point. So um, that's another one of my passions is the multi-generational workforce, because I was
Wow.
thrust into that right away. Here I am, I've been named a program director, and I've got, staff that I'm younger than most of my staff, really, probably.
Yeah, that had to be hard. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a unique and formative life experience, but um, that organization, to their credit, had a leadership development process.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay, so we new managers and directors. We had to set aside a block of time on a regular basis to meet with our CEO,
Wow. Okay.
and it was specifically to learn leadership and management.
Wow. Okay. That's
Um,
neat.
it was really neat, and one of the formative moments I'll never forget early on in those times with our leader at that point of the whole organization was he was talking about stereotypes of leadership, right?
Okay.
And the stereotype of the dynamic CEO riding in on a white horse, carrying the flag, and this might date me a little bit, but his example, and date him too, perhaps, his example that he used was like Lee Iacocca,
Oh,
you know.
wow.
You remember
Wow.
Lee, came in
Yes.
and like saved Chrysler Corporation or something like
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
You know, but
The
his point
one man to do it all.
Well, yeah, he's just going to come in and have all these amazing ideas and is just going to ride off into the sunset, and the organization's going to, take off. And, but that organization, their emphasis was on servant leadership.
Mm,
That's not the norm.
right.
That's not the norm. And then really teaching us, what is servant leadership, and what does that look like, and the power of that.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah,
was very
delve
fun.
into that a little bit more, Steve. So, from your perspective, what did you learn? I kind of have two kind of areas to go into because I'm learning a lot of what you're saying. What really is the difference from your perspective of leadership and servant leadership, right? Like how do you define those in your eyes, especially since you kind of went through a process of acknowledging that, or at least that's what I'm hearing from what you were saying from some of those formative times.
Yeah, I think there could be times a stereotype that a leader has to look and sound a certain way,
Hmm.
and you have to be very maybe even loud and dynamic, and
Yeah.
you're kind of driving with your charisma, and the force of your will,
Yeah.
is going to bring excellence to the table, and you're gonna, achieve all these amazing things. And their point was that, servant leadership is just different than that. And
Hmm.
and that was really impactful for me, because I'm a little more introspective, and
Hmm.
I'm not always going to be the loudest person in the room right off the bat. I have a different energy than that,
Yeah,
and
that introverted side of things.
a little bit, and
Yeah.
I obviously love interacting with people all the time, but there's a part of me that's more introspective,
Yeah,
and
that's great.
I'm not going to walk in and be the loudest person off the bat. So I kind of, out of that process, partly I learned is like, whoa, people like me can be leaders, you know,
Mm.
and so they spend a good
Oh,
bit
so
of
you felt that if you didn't have that boisterous intensity that you probably couldn't be so you felt that's an interesting thing. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there,
yeah,
but that
no,
that
no,
really is for a lot of people that are listening probably that are trying to be leaders, like right, that leaders come, I think, in all different, formats, right? Like it's not, but I think what you're saying is before it seemed like the standard leader was this audacious,
hmm
you know, loud person. Okay, very good. I'm sorry. Continue.
no, yeah, they really spent a lot of time trying to dispel that myth, because that's not the type of
Yeah,
leader they wanted.
right.
Um, they wanted a leader that fit a kind of more of a servant leader mold, where
Okay.
the idea was that your goal is to lift up others,
Mm,
create teams that where people feel valued and respected,
mm,
and there's collaboration, so it's a process,
yeah.
and long-term consistent quality effort over a long span of time,
Hmm.
so
And how did they kind of compare? Like, so that's beautiful because I love that, right? Like, and you talk about like generations and generational aspects of that, but like talk about how did or was there any conversation on the values of the organization or what we define as like core values today? Like, was that integrated into this conversation? If so, could you kind of enlighten us a little bit more of like how that was brought into the conversation?
yeah, it definitely was. And, my career has ended up really in the nonprofit world. And this was a nonprofit setting, a large
Okay.
one, albeit, but a nonprofit setting. And, I've wondered sometimes if maybe in nonprofit culture, the conversation around mission and vision and values is it's just a part of our
Part
essence.
of
It's
it.
a part of our
Yeah.
being, right? And that's the world I've been a part in all these years. But I've wondered at times, has some of that began to filter out in a bigger way, maybe to our
Mm,
friends in the corporate world,
yeah.
that are they maybe adapting some of our language a little bit more in a
Mm,
different way. I
that's
don't
good.
know what your take is on that, but
Yeah.
yeah, so there is that dynamic to point out, that it's been a part of the nonprofit DNA for a really,
Mm,
really,
for a while.
really, it's just part of who we are. So yeah, that was definitely a part of it. And I think that the nonprofit setting and the concepts of servant leadership are natural
Hmm.
fits
Hmm.
there, that maybe in the corporate world, it's maybe been a little bit of a process
Right.
to weave them together. And maybe that's
Right.
where, it takes some intentionality, like a podcast like this, to really
Right.
elevate the conversation and say,
Mm,
okay, how do we bring some of these principles to bear in our settings that are more corporate or more for profit?
That's well said. I think from conversations that we've had, right, it's very easy to hear kind of mission and vision is what drives a lot of nonprofits, right? But then when you look at it from a corporate world, I think many times it's not even defined, right?
Mhm.
So employees get into organization and don't even understand why the organization exists, right? And I think so, like as a nonprofit, we know beautiful intro of Samaritan Center and the beautiful things they do, and they exist for a reason. I think sometimes in the corporate world, people don't understand what organizations they join and why they exist, and I
Mhm.
think that that's not a healthy place to be, right? Like how do you integrate into an area? You become very individualized and not really servant minded in a way, I guess, is somewhat of my opinion from what I've seen. But it seems as if that was beautiful though that back then they got you all together. Were you selected? Like so people that are listening that are trying to become leaders, right? Like what sparked your thoughts of like I can lead, or like did it instinctively come to you? Were you mentored? Were you coached? Like it sounds like you've had some really great people in your life that have helped lift you up, which is amazing. And we hear that quite often. But like what spurred you to kind of think like, you know what, I'm going to lead into this uncomfortableness and I'm going to try this, like
Yeah. Yeah, I would say there's maybe a couple ingredients in that. One was I had already had kind of a work ethic of no matter what I was doing, I'm going to try to bring my best to the table,
mm,
no matter what,
mm.
right? So that even goes back, like in high school, I'll give this example. In high school, I got a job at Kentucky Fried Chicken,
All right,
right? This is high
got some
school
good
stuff,
potato
man.
wedges there.
High school stuff, so would work the evening shift, closing down the kitchen then at the KFC about 20 minutes from where I grew up in
All
Central
right.
PA. And by golly, by the time we left, the kitchen looked great. You
Mm.
know, it was shining. That was hard. That is hard work. That
That
is not
is hard
good
work.
stuff. It is yeah, it's not glamorous and it's hard work, but
Mm,
so just for whatever reason I had this inkling that there's always an opportunity to bring good work to the table, to bring that
mm,
excellence to the table. So I just kept that mindset the whole way along.
mm.
And I think that was important where people saw something out of that, maybe
Right.
they saw something that was a little bit different. Maybe I cared a little bit more about how that kitchen
Mm.
looked at the end of the night for whatever
Right.
reason,
Right.
right? Um, and I think that's where, at times people would tap me on the shoulder then, and that's where it just kind of happened. And when those moments came, like that first time I was tapped on the shoulder about being a director, I took a day, and I just kind of in my way thought about it, reflected, prayed, however you want to put it. And,
Yeah.
I gave him the answer the next day that, I'm going to accept. And so the other ingredient then was that I've just had this, willingness to go one step at a time and do the next step,
Yeah.
do the
Yeah.
next step. And as it's a leap of faith, you don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
Uh, and there's times where that next step has taken me into situations that were far from certain. I've gone into situations where there were big question marks on even is
Mm.
the organization even going to make it?
Right.
I've encountered that, and whether just that willingness or even youthful exuberance, some of
Yeah.
these decisions. I was a little younger back then, but just was willing to step out, you
Yeah.
know and be vulnerable,
Right.
and have without guarantees. There's no guarantee what if something's going to work all the time.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's well said. I think I kind of going back, I have a question. So you talked about your work ethic and or I guess I'm summarizing it as your work ethic, like who you are and how you performed. Do you feel that you received that as like something that was instilled in you from a family perspective, or was it instinctive? Many times we hear a lot of people say, man, it started at home, right? Like these were the actions that were instilled in me, the values and that type of thing. Do you find that to be similar in your situation?
Yeah, I think it was a mix. I think, I could see some pieces of that from home,
Okay.
and then just in my personal journey. Uh,
Okay.
I yeah, it's just evolved. I must have gotten for some reason I got a satisfaction
Ah, of
um,
that.
out of that, and maybe also a little bit of trust that, somehow there's good fruit that could come out of it.
Ah.
A
So it
little
was
bit.
more of a, your leading journey has been of kind of summarizing for those that are listening to kind of that you led into kind of some uncomfortableness. You're like, I'm going to try this. And it sounds like every time you tried that, there was some level of growth.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
that helped to instill kind of even more confidence to understand and validate kind of what your abilities were. So that's amazing. Um, from your perspective on kind of how that grew, how did that lead you to then being, the executive director at Samaritan?
Yeah, so I this is my second executive director role.
Okay.
The first executive director role was very formative and very pivotal in my journey as a leader.
Really?
Because again, I was tapped on the shoulder, uh,
Mm,
and the person who came before me left pretty kind of abruptly. It wasn't totally
okay.
known that that
Okay.
was going to happen at that moment. But again, I leaned into that moment, not knowing for sure what was going to come out of it, and from that journey, ended up proposing some pretty radical changes for that
Wow.
organization, and led them through some pretty radical changes, and so a lot of formative moments came out of that.
Mm,
But a common theme, I think, is just having that willingness to step out into the unknown a little bit and just
mhm.
keep building brick by brick, on your
Right.
experiences, and trust a little bit
Mm,
that, you've learned enough to take the next step,
right.
to do the next thing. But when you get to those moments, it is a leap. It is a leap because there is no guarantee.
Right.
Uh, there's no guarantee that you're going to know enough or or have the best idea or
Right.
whatever that the team is going to come around. You have to be willing to put yourself out there a little bit.
Put it that. That's great said. I think a lot of people too that we talk to that are trying to go through this journey think that it also comes that you have to have this master's MBA and all this education. And from my experience, I don't see that as, I mean, we all are leaders, right? We're maybe leaders in our family, leaders in a team. We don't all have to be at an executive level to lead
No,
or
no.
to have impact. And I think what's really cool about leading at a servant level is from my perspective is that it's about we before me, right? Like it's about the collective good of the impact that we're creating over the individualism. Now, I will say we all have to pay our bills, and we all have a little bit of the, we're moving forward, but we have to take care of ourselves as well. So I don't want to neglect that for those that are listening. But I think it's really neat to hear those that are, it seems like such a fulfilling experience to kind of help others and build others up, right? And what I hear sometimes from leaders is like, well, I was a really great individual performer and now I'm building other people up to get all the credit. And I'm like, well,
Yeah,
but that's leadership, right? Like
yeah.
that and some then that's where they kind of self-select. Like, I like to be the individual,
Mhm.
and there's nothing wrong with that. I
Nothing
think I
wrong with
just
that.
see that that's where the journey is. And many of them say, well, I've been working in a role for so long, I think I should probably be a manager. And so,
Right.
like, we don't want them to not take the leap, but realize that it's okay not to be either. Right.
Indeed,
Like,
indeed. No, it's one of those classic concepts of being on the right seat of the bus type of thing,
right,
and having that self-awareness.
right.
This journey is not for everybody. I've had my share of sleepless nights, definitely.
Oh,
I've had to learn how to manage that and how to take care of myself to where they're at a minimum. You can't live
right.
that way all the time, but they definitely can happen. And there can be there can be a loneliness that comes from
Yes.
where if the buck stops with you at the end of the day, there can be a level of loneliness in that at
It's so
times.
hard. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's well said. I think one thing that I've learned from some other people like Patrick Lencioni that talks about trust and building trust and having inherent trust, it really kind of takes a little bit of that loneliness away. But like, the more that you get into the we, I found from a leadership perspective, it takes some of the loneliness away because now we're collectively trusting and are on the same page, makes it a lot easier to make decisions, but still quite sleepless, right? Like every day. I don't think it ever goes away. And I said, I personally have a coach, and he said to me, the day that you stop feeling that way is the day that you probably should stop doing what you're doing. And I'm like, wow, that's so like insightful. And I'm like, well, what do you mean by that? He goes, that is the little tick that makes us make sure that we're still performing for the people we
Mm.
need to serve. And I was like,
Yeah.
wow, wow.
Yeah, yeah, that's well said, and yeah, it's an indication of the care and concern,
Right.
see that it is serious. It is serious work, to be responsible and great. That's very true about the team as well, and growing. That's a huge part of this work, and that's one of the, like you said, it's not for everybody, but that creating a situation that lifts others up and allows
It
people to
does.
grow. Right, for me at this point, seeing someone be given an opportunity to do something and to step up and
Yeah.
perform and get to see them have that satisfaction and
Yeah.
increase in confidence of, no, I can do this, it's like, wow, okay, that's a good day.
Yeah.
It's a good
What's
day.
really amazing too is then it helps them professionally, personally. Like it's so amazing to see people kind of grow in all areas. That's what gets me excited as a leader of like if we can do it together and accomplish kind of our common mission or goal, but then that we all develop, right? Every day we're developing. I think also too, there's a misnomer of like I've hit the leadership level, so I never have to stop learning and I've hit the pinnacle. And that's absolutely from at least my experience every day I mess up,
Yes.
I redirect, and I
Yep.
try to just be 1% better each and every day. And that's all that I can expect of anybody else, too.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. It's a never-ending refinement,
Yeah,
constant refining of like, oh, yeah, I didn't hit the note on that one. I missed that one. That
right,
wasn't quite the right, it wasn't quite the right energy or the right
right.
whatever, right communication. So yeah, and that's there's a level of intensity to that, that
Yeah,
maybe not everybody is going to embrace, but yeah, staying teachable and that journey of being willing to be refined
right.
over a long span of time.
Period of time. So from your perspective, one thing that just keeps thinking in my head is right, like you said, like it's instinctive for nonprofits having this mission and vision. What do you think is like a singular core value that a for-profit business really should have in the organization that you feel that would help them align with this service leadership mentality?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you're certainly asking someone that hasn't had to think about that a lot, right? But
Yeah.
for better or for worse. But I think adding, you know, what value are you adding to somebody's situation?
Mm.
You know, I love one of my hobbies is food. I love food. I'm a little bit of a foodie. I got all different ways to cook and as like a
Oh,
hobby,
I love it.
to prepare and play around. And I love checking out, exciting places that have like a buzz, hey, this place,
Yeah.
you gotta check it out. I get really excited. But to me, those places add value to my life,
Mm.
a place where, they're really cooking with love and passion. Uh,
Mm.
you almost can tell like there's
You can
something different.
feel it.
They're not just doing a job, right?
Mm.
They're creating something different. They're creating something with another value,
Mm, I
They're
love that.
sharing a
That's
part of
good.
themselves. They're sharing a part of themselves,
Yeah.
and that's exciting.
Oh, I like that. But that's kind of like they're kind of leading with their passion almost.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
love that. That gets me
And
fired up.
I
You
think
know.
those are end up being some of the best restaurants, and they don't have to be, super fancy. They don't have to be the most expensive.
Yeah.
Uh, but they're bringing something to the table that has impact, and I think that comes from something deeper than just trying to make the bottom line.
Right. That's right. Oh, that's a great one. As we start to talk about like learning, is there any like people that you follow or that you read that have inspired you that might inspire others too that are listening?
Yeah, I'll keep it simple on that front. I'm always seeking inputs, and even the last couple years I've tried to I've increased my reading another notch.
Okay.
So and I've actually started to read more fiction, which for a long time I
Ah.
hadn't been reading any fiction. So I've added in a bigger dose of fiction these last couple years, which I've really
Mm.
enjoyed. I found that to be it's become one of my great joys and a way to take care of
Ah.
myself a little bit is to read more. But if I think about, there's all the classic works, that we've probably all been through, Good to Great and all these different things. But
Yeah.
out of everything, one that I wanted to pass on and just emphasize again is that's impacted me over and over and over again is seek first to understand, then to be
Mm,
understood.
I love it.
Yeah, so I was kind of getting into a little bit, if I was going to pass on one of the most impactful um, words of wisdom that I've picked up from reading or being involved in leadership, being mentored and things like that, it comes back to this principle that a lot of us have heard before, but to seek first to understand and
Mm,
then be understood.
mm,
So that's a principle that I've just kept coming back to over and over and over again. And I'll catch myself and I'll be like, no, this is a time to slow down. This is a
mm,
time to listen. And
mm,
listening to the point where the other person feels like you actually are getting that, like you're actually getting
hmm
it, right?
Yeah.
Right. Because so many times we might be in where we're already thinking about the answer, and we're not listening. Then it's done.
Yeah.
They're talking. They want to be understood. They're trying to make me understand.
hmm
Then maybe I want to make them understand me, right? So we've just missed a moment. We've just missed it. So I put that on myself. And I get
Whoa.
another aspect of I try as much as possible to, I say it maybe in a little bit of a harsh term, I blame myself first. Like
Mm,
I'll take the
hmm
responsibility. Okay, I messed that up.
Right.
I didn't
Right.
listen good enough.
Mm,
I didn't make you feel understood. That's on me.
mm,
That's on me. I can do better. I can do better, you
mm.
know.
Now, wouldn't you say though that some of that is like humbleness, right? Like when you're humble and you're leading and you're putting others in front of your own interests, you instinctively reflect back, or at least I find similar to myself, like those that I've spoken to that embody this really have a humbleness to them, right? Like they have a humbleness to learn for themselves, to redirect, to say, okay, what can I do better? It seems like really great leaders have the same instinct that you have, that it's like, what can I do better? How can I improve it? And that seems to be a really constant, great quality that I hear over and over again. And I think that's really remarkable that it also probably gives you the drive to, what you probably learn, you probably then institute in with the people maybe that you are teaching as well too. I think it's got to be really hard to be in the position you're in. Like, I don't even know how they teach you that, right? Like, how do they teach you to listen and to then effectively ask questions in counseling, right? Like,
Yeah.
that has to be right because you have to really be such a great listener and then a non-judgment voice of compassion like that. You have such a wonderful um opportunity, but man, that's got to be quite difficult, right? Especially if you're like, man, I know if you did this tomorrow you would be, but that's not the way you have to think. And I think you're explaining like leadership and servant leadership is very similar to that, right?
Yeah, there is definitely
Yeah.
overlap. That's a neat connection. I don't know that, yeah, thanks for putting it that way. Um, the the humility is just if you're in this at any length of time, it's just a reality that you're not going to get everything right.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So you either like embrace you embrace your own humanity
Yeah.
or you burn out. I don't know what would
Right.
happen. There's just a reality. Like I've said that, there's no way that I'm gonna, you know, see every variable all the time. There's no way I'm
Mm.
gonna totally understand every dynamic.
Hmm.
I'm gonna miss things. I'm gonna miss
Yeah.
things. I'm
Yeah.
gonna, it might be an opportunity, it might be a connection, it might be a something, an idea. I'm not gonna hit everything right on, and so this work is humbling, and you have to find a way to be okay with that, or else you
Yeah.
probably not stick with it.
Right. Yeah, that's well said. And I think it goes along from the counseling, but the leadership too, right? I think at both sides. It's difficult at sometimes to be a leader because you're leading. One person gave me this visual that's just really impactful to me is that there's a group that we lead and they're kind of in a desert, right? And they're all beside, in the tents and comfortable. And you lead and you go out into the desert and you look to see where these dangers are and these cliffs and other things that are happening. And then you find the next vision and you bring them along. I was like, wow, that's like a really strong visual, at least for me, maybe because I'm just kind of a basic person, right? But it really just brought to the point that we don't take everybody with us till we kind of connect what the vision is as a leader, and then can understand where the dangers are and then bring them effectively along. So I don't know. I was thinking about that while you were talking.
Yeah,
That
thanks for sharing that. And this is a little glimpse into, I have a little bit of maybe a geeky or a nerdy side. My my fiction I'm reading right now, somehow this never got on my reading list even when I was younger, is Dune. I'm reading Dune for
really.
so your desert analogy is like aligning with my reading right now. Thanks for that.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. Well, so, from your perspective, for those that are listening, there's a lot that we talked about. We kind of like summarized that. We said that a lot of these were experiences of the kind of leaning in, feeling uncomfortable. What would you say for people that are really, they feel the fire like you did, right? Like at a young age, they could be in high school, they could be in college right now, they could just be in the workforce. And like, what advice would you give them that, like, if they feel the fire but they're kind of afraid to lean in, like what next step could they take in your eyes? Or because many of them say, well, my boss doesn't tell me that I can lead, or I don't have the opportunity to do it. Do you have any advice for them on maybe where they can kind of start to lean in?
Mhm. Yeah, two things. One, always, that with that fire, bring excellence to the
mm,
table to the best of your ability. No matter what you're
mhm,
doing, it doesn't matter. The task doesn't matter. The
mm,
task doesn't matter. Take away that, I think sometimes young folks might come out and think they have to, conquer the world in 5 years or something, or
mm,
achieve like a fancy position right away.
mm,
No, forget it. Don't worry about that so
mm,
much. Don't worry about the title behind your name at the moment,
mhm,
right? Just develop the principles, develop the simple principles, and
mm,
apply them consistently over a long span of time.
that's
Bring
great.
excellence to the table, and then be teachable. Be teachable.
Mm,
Maybe get a mentor. One of
mm.
the first things I did when I got that first executive director role was to get an executive mentor coach.
Coach, yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and I probably, I've had mentors all along the way, so that wasn't my first time with that.
Okay.
Anytime, if you can find someone that's willing to be a little bit of a mentor to you, either formally or informally,
Hmm.
there's ways to formally seek that out. Little plug, we've got a great organization in Lancaster, the SCORE Foundation.
Oh, yes.
Big
Hmm.
fan of SCORE. I have a coach through SCORE.
Oh, that's
Um,
amazing.
yeah, yeah. So that's a formal version, but there could be someone in your life
Mm.
that could be a coach if you have that desire, if you want to do more and be involved in this journey.
Oh, that's great. I love that. That's wonderful, Steve. And one thing that kind of recognized too, there's a book, everybody, if you're interested, called Go Giver. And it's a really amazing, amazing small book. But it kind of goes over what Steve's saying right now, right? Many of us that have gone through our leadership journey then generally turn to be more mentors or, coaches. And it's an amazing story that shows somebody that is brand new and wants to conquer the world. And it shows what it means to be a go-giver as kind of an actual real gem, right? Like whereas we're trying to drive for money or status, at the end of the day, the richest person was the one that gave the most away, right? Even a coaching, not necessarily money. So if you're into that, anybody, take a look, take a listen. It's pretty amazing. And we have a really amazing leader here, Steve. Samaritan. If you don't know Samaritan, check it out. Samaritan Center is filled with many wonderful things in the Lancaster community. They are a gem. And the really beautiful thing that you heard earlier in intro is about healing, and what Steve has put together as a team has really brought a lot of healing to people and to communities and to businesses. And you can speak more to that, Steve, but a very big passion that I feel sometimes goes unnoticed, right? Like we're always trying to solve problems, but healing is part of solving the problem too, sometimes maybe, or getting over something. So I really appreciate the work that you do and your team does, and the energy that you put towards it, and the dedication, and how you lead through that. You're very inspirational, and more people should understand what it means to lead in that manner. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you, Nick. Very kind words, and thanks for the little plug for Samaritan there as well. So check
Yeah.
us out, www.samaritanlancaster.org. Our nonprofit mission is to provide quality counseling services to anybody. We've taken steps to be more accessible than ever, as far as the different insurances that we take, and we also expanding to a new location down in Lancaster City, which we're really excited
Yes.
about.
Beautiful.
So that's the core of what we do, but we impact the community in multiple different ways. We provide consulting services for businesses, which it's just really neat to impact people's lives in that way. We say we're here to build healthy minds and strong communities. We spend a
Mm.
lot of time at work, sometimes more than at home, depending on the situation.
Yeah.
So our business consulting group is doing a wonderful job, and everything that they do then folds back into our nonprofit mission to create
Mm.
access to counseling
Beautiful.
services. So we got a unique thing going on here. We're very blessed to be a part of the Lancaster community.
Wonderful. Keep up the great work. And as we kind of close our chapter here today, this kind of wraps up another enlightening episode of Servant Leadership Library. A huge thank you to our incredible guest, Steve. You're wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your invaluable insights from the heart of Samaritan Center. And remember, folks, in a world where leadership often means climbing the ladder, servant leadership reminds us to build bridges instead. So until next time, keep leading with kindness, compassion, and a sparkle of, excitement there. Not too much, as Steve said, but, add a little excitement there. This is Nicholas Paulukow signing off. Stay servant-hearted, my friends. Until next time.